So I want to welcome everyone to this week's xEssentials. Tonight is the last final one of the year. So I think this is the 34th or 35th topic that we've covered. So a lot of great content in the library. If you haven't gotten a chance to see all the presentations, I encourage you to do so. So tonight's presentation is basic controller builds. So last March, Ricky Cloutier gave a presentation at Transworld, and he will be given pretty much the same kind of presentation, I think, from what he covered there. So a lot of great tips from all the folks I know that saw the past presentation. A lot of great ideas. So you ready, Ricky?
Yeah, I'm ready. If you can hear me.
We can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, well, I'll start out with I'm Ricky, and I've been doing controls for a couple years now. And I just want to kind of go over the fact that these are kind of my ideas and stuff. It's not necessarily what you have to do. It's just kind of if you have a controller and you have a power supply and you're trying to figure out what box to put it in or what to do with it, or what size to cut plates or etc. Hopefully I can help you out with that with this presentation. So we will get started. We're going to start right out with tools. Let's see if I can get this to switch screens for me. And I did. So here's a list of tools that kind of I would suggest. I mean, if you're going to get into the Christmas world anyway, most of these are used in multiple fashions besides just controller building. Definitely, drills and drill bits are really important to drill out the boxes. Hole saws and step bits work really well when you need to drill out bigger holes at multiple sizes. I have a jigsaw on here because you can pretty much do anything with a jigsaw. It may not be the straightest line, but you can cut plates. You can cut pretty much anything with that. And I guess some pictures coming up here pretty soon. But most of the stuff on this list is not real expensive. And I'm a big advocate of Harbor Freight. I'm sure most of y'all have Harbor Freights near you. If not, like Amazon has some of the stuff pretty cheap, or even your local Walmart. Honestly, one of my favorite drills I use comes from Walmart. So just some other things, some needle nose pliers. I use those to actually bend my wires. So when you actually put them on the board, you put them on the power supplies, they work really well to bend your 90-degree angles with your on your wire. And then just the normal stuff like tape measures and squares. And I mean, I said skill saw or chop saw. You don't need that, but they do come in handy. And probably one of the more better ones, a soldering iron. That's something you probably definitely want to have too. If you get into building these, as some of you will find out, you have to fix quite a bit of stuff. So we're going to go into some pictures here to kind of go over them. So here are my drills. That drill, I actually use drills for everything when I'm building my controllers. I started out doing everything by hand, and if you've installed about 3,000 of them little green connectors that go on the end of your pigtails with a hand screwdriver, you won't have fingers left. I believe that's equally as hard as pushing pixels. But I found this little drill here at Walmart. It's like $20 or $24, and I put a little bit in it, and it works great. So you can basically strip your wires back on your pigtails, and you can hold that green connector in your hand, and you can actually put them 3 screws in using a drill. It's like I said, it's way faster, especially when you're doing a pile of them. And then plus, I found with a drill, it gets them tight, unlike sometimes with a screwdriver, where they'll actually you don't get them tight enough, and they'll pop out. My next picture is step bits. These are, again, if you notice, these are all from Harbor Freight. Harbor Freight, they're extremely cheap. They work really well. You don't need to buy the $50, $60 ones. I think the 3-pack is like $10 or $12. And I can tell you that little one there has probably drilled, I don't know, 2,000 holes for me in boxes. They work really well. There's my famous, jigsaw to use for pretty much everything. And then dielectric grease is not really a tool, but I believe it needs to be in your toolbox, especially when you're building controllers. I put dielectric grease in everything. I put dielectric grease on the end of my pigtails before they go out. I always squirt a little in the pass-throughs. I would just suggest having a big tube of this for everything, especially if you get a lot of water. I mean, if you're dry, then you're fine. But like Alabama had 24 inches of rain in December, and without dielectric grease, I would have had issues. But I mean, we ran night after night in the rain. Let's see here. Let's go to the next one. Let's start talking about materials. Okay, so if you're building a controller, especially in the hot weather, you're probably going to need to add some vents. Now, on like the ready-to-runs David sells, you don't usually put vents in those. That's just a single power supply in the CG 1500. And most of them don't have vents. I've built several dual power supply 1500s, and I do like to, on like the duals, if I know they're going to be in really hot weather, I'll a lot of times add a vent to the center just to help with the heat issues. In your bud boxes, you definitely want to add a vent. If you're using bud boxes, at least 1 to 2 vents, depending on how many power supplies you're doing. And bud has 2 different ones. So like I listed here, you got the 1115 and the 1116. Obviously the 15 is quite a bit smaller. It don't really show in this picture how much smaller, but it is quite a bit smaller. It works well in the smaller boxes. I really only use the 116 in the Bud 32026 boxes, the bigger ones with like 4 power supplies. And we're not going to really go into that too much because this is more for the basics. So we're going to kind of just keep it simple with the smaller boxes. Next in my picture are some glands. Now I've seen a lot of posts on Facebook. And to be honest with you, 3 years ago when I started building boxes, I actually had to message Clyde Lindsay and say, what are those things you use to stick out of the box? Because I just didn't know. It's a common question. What are they? So he told me, and I've seen them questions like this week, literally, which glands do we use? I see PG7s, I see PG9s, which is which? What's the difference? So the PG7 gland is used for pigtails. It pretty much fits every pigtail manufacturer. Sometimes there's a little stiff going through and you got to pull the nut off and kind of work the rubber down. Sometimes they slide right in. It varies on the manufacturer of the gland. I've seen them, fit to not fit in a batch. So it does vary on those, but that's what the 7 is for, the smaller one. And I can tell you that the 7 also uses a 1/2-inch hole. So if you're drilling holes, I use a 1/2-inch step bit and I just blow through to make that hole. The PG9 is used for power. It's just a little bit bigger. It fits most of the cords. And that one actually uses a 5/8 bit. So those would be your 2 power glands. We're going to talk about some other glands here in the next slide. And then the other essential tool I have here is a piece of Wascoyo continuous mounting strip. I'd probably say at least 90% of the people on here probably have some of that laying around. It's left over from your roll or whatever. And that is like the perfect spacing for glands when you're marking them out in the box. A little bit later on in a few slides from here, you'll actually see where I marked out a box with this. Like I said, it's perfect. They're nice and straight. The holes are all even. It's great, and it's pretty much a 1/2-inch hole. So I've used this one many times for that. Let's see here. More pass-throughs. Let's talk about all the different options of pass-throughs. in most of your CG boxes, like the CG 2000 box, which we're going to go over the boxes here in a minute. Most of them, you don't usually put a gland. Most people just feed them through the bottom. No connectors. It's just easy. They're just a small, you're using them for a receiver. So you typically wouldn't put some through. Now, I have seen some people put glands through. You can, you don't have to. Again, just whatever really works the best for you. I prefer to keep things as simple as possible. I think there was one last year, someone said, I think it was KISS, keep it simple, stupid, or something like that. That applies to box building. You guys really don't need to overthink this box building. I've seen many pictures, and there's some really cool stuff out there in advanced box building and stuff, but if you're just getting ready to getting into this, just keep it simple. You don't have to go crazy and put all this extra stuff in it. I mean, you need a power supply, you need a controller, you need pigtails and power. It don't require all the extra bells and whistles. But let's go through here. The outer one here, the black one, that is a male to female, basically extension. I found those last year when I was trying to come up with a solution. So when I sent out boxes that I didn't have to add a coupler. I was having issues sending out couplers to people with just an Ethernet cable, so they didn't have to get into their boxes. They could just plug into it and go. And the couplers, I mean, they're just another point to go bad. I had a bunch of issues with them with some people, and that's when I found this cable. So when I build boxes, if it's a receiver, if it's, you know, like an F48, I'll put one of these in for the main Ethernet in. So you can just plug into it and go. You're not feeding a cable into your box. I've run them in my show for a year, no problems. They work really, really well, and they're pretty inexpensive. The next one is a regular RJ45 pass-through for Ethernet. This one has the wire connected onto it, so you can just put it in your box and plug it into your. I have no idea why there's a yellow line in my screen. You can. There's another yellow line. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. For some reason, I keep getting yellow lines on my.
Somebody's doing animation.
Oh, okay. So these right here, you can just basically plug in. They work equally as well as the ones without it. It saves you from having to buy the cable. They cost pretty much the same amount of money either way, and multiple vendors sell these. Then you have a straight version, and what a lot of people don't actually use, and I use pretty much 95% of, is these 90-degree ones. I love these little 90-degree ones. They fit really tight in your box. You can put them up against power supplies, and then you can just come out of the top and then loop over. So when you're buying these, like I said, there's like 3 or 4 different options for these. And most of the vendors sell them. You can also get them on Amazon. There's all kinds of places to pick these up. Now, one thing I do is I also squirt my grease into the end of these to keep the water out. They make a water connector. I don't know if too many people use them because you got to break the cable and reconnect it to use those. So I just find dielectric grease in these, and you really don't have a problem. Just to the right of that, these are the non-metallic connectors. This is what you would see in like David's Raider runs. You'd see these in most of the CG 1500 builds. I use these for the 1500s. I actually use 3/4 for my power in one of these black Ethernet whips out left side of the box, and then I use 2 1-inch connectors beside it to run either my 16 pigtails through, or if I'm building a 48 in that same box, I'll just leave 2 of those open so I can just pass the cables up through from my receivers to plug into my 48. And those you can get from Home Depot or Lowe's, or online or Amazon. I mean, they're really readily available. Okay, let's talk about boxes for a minute. Now, I know I only have 7 boxes here, and there's a lot more options than this, but these are the primary boxes you see a lot of, or you hear a lot about. And this kind of gives you a good comparison to size. So you kind of have a feel of size differences per the box. Your CG2000 is pretty much single receiver, single power supply stuff. That's what most people are using these boxes for. You can get 2 receivers in them, or you can get a receiver and a power distro. But the 2000 works really good for that. The 1500 is the other common box you guys see, which would be like the ready to runs, this single or dual power supply with an F16, or you can put an F48 in it with a receiver. I've actually have one that you can actually get an F48 with a receiver in. So that box really works good for that, and it's an inexpensive box to be able to do that with. Next up would be like the 32022. Now, there's not a lot of people that probably use this box. I use it a ton. This is kind of my favorite box. And I use this one just for F16s. I build an F16 with 2 power supplies in this box. It's really clean. You have a nice flat surface to run all your glands out the bottom. There's a nice spot for a vent on the side. And it makes for a really nice, clean looking box. And it utilizes pretty much all the space in it. You can also fit one 4-port diff on top of this. It does fit in that box. It's a little snug, but it works well. I know a lot of you guys are building this one right here, which is the 32026 box. This is this box can be used for tons of stuff. It fits 4 power supplies really well. You can put an F16 with an expansion board and a 4-port diff on it. There's plenty of room for 32 holes out the bottom for your glands. It really makes a nice box. Then you have the Goliath, which is the 32034. This is a good 6 power supply box. If you want to build a big 48-port controller with 6 power supplies, 2 vents and 2 fans, if you want to get into building that, it fits really nice into this box. I built several of these. It works really well for that. And then you have the 2 ammo boxes. This is kind of where I started life, and with building controllers, is I started out with ammo builds after watching Clyde back like 3 years ago. I built several out of these boxes, and they're great boxes. My problem with these boxes was how do I hook stuff to them? There's no good way without drilling through the box to hook the backing plate. Now, if you're just going to lay them on the ground, it's not a big deal. But what I was running into is I wanted to hang them on the wall. So to hang them on the wall, I had to figure out how to hook all my stuff in them. So I kind of veered away from that and started using the buds and the CGs. Now, there's all kinds of other stuff. Like I said, just because I'm showing this particular set, you can put a controller in any box. Really, the same principles apply to any box you're building. I mean, it don't have to be one of these. It could be one of the little plastic toolboxes. It can be. I've seen. I hate to say Tupperware dishes, but I've seen a lot of controllers built in Tupperware dishes. They work. You're trying to just protect your controller from the weather. That's what you're ultimately trying to do. And again, you don't have to get crazy. You can do it pretty simply. Let's go into the 1500s here. Start moving through some slides. I just keep rambling here. I'm sorry. This is a good picture of a F16 in a 1500. This is basically a ready to run. This is what you get basically from David Pitts. I don't really build too many of these. Most of the time, I prefer 2 power supplies. I just figure 1 power supply for each half of the board. So I would rather do 2. Now you can put a set of brackets. I believe I have a picture coming up here of a set of brackets with a second power supply with this same setup. But this kind of gives you an idea of a 1500. It's using the 2 1-inch non-metallic connectors and the 1 3/4 at the bottom. And then obviously your F16s in the bottom. This is a very basic build. The backing plate, I've gone to these cut ones, but for a while, I was cutting on my own. I actually have some pictures coming up of some of that stuff. Let's move to the next one. This is a list. I thought this would be more of a, you guys could go back if somebody needed information. I'm not going to bore you with reading everything on here, but basically this is a material list to build that particular controller. I thought it might be kind of helpful for some people who are like, I just don't know, what do I need for screws? What do I need for pass-throughs? What do I need for power supplies? What would I need to do that? So basically, let's hit some of the highlights. Basically, I'm showing you the connectors, what you need, obviously the pigtails, 10 gauge wire, which I suggest using pretty much for everything. This is your screw sizes, because this is a question I get a lot too. What size screws do I need for my power supplies? And then it comes down to, well, what size backing plate you have? Are you using 1/8" Lexan, or are you using 3/16 backing plates like most of the vendors are selling, the black ones? So I'm giving you both of the screw sizes that work well with that. What size screws do we need to hook the controller down, which is the M4 16mm. They work great. They're perfect size with the spacer. And then over here on the right, I'm giving you the sizes. So that's the size the plate needs to be cut to, 9.5 by 9.5. And you can cut that. Let me see here, move to the next one, next slide here. You can cut that out of a piece of Lexan. You can cut it out of, I mean, I've seen them cut out of anything. Again, you don't have to use the plates that you have to buy. You can cut them out of, I mean, I've seen them out of cutting boards. I've seen them out of Lexan. I've seen them out of hard plastic. I've seen them out of plywood. I'm not a big advocate of plywood. In some areas, there's a lot of moisture. I like to stay away from plywood. I don't particularly personally like using plywood or suggest it, just because of moisture issues in plywood. I guess if I was to suggest, if plywood's all you can get, I would suggest at least paint it, at least seal your plywood up. I mean, a rattle can of you know, Exo Rust or whatever is $2 or $3. Just spray it, spray the edges real good. Just try to seal that plywood up a little bit, just to keep the moisture out of it, if that's your only choice. And like I said, the picture on the left here, this is like my original plate. This was like my original design that I templated hundreds of controllers out of. This showed where to drill the holes out the front, where to mark my stuff, and this plate I would copy onto the next one and copy onto the next one, and to do this is really simple. So if you have a basic square, you can just lay your power supply on, like I have on here on the right, and lay your controller on it. And you can just draw a picture around it, as you can see I did here. You can mark the holes through the controller, and then the power supply, you just flip it over and look and mark the holes and drill them. It's pretty simple. Again, we don't need to overthink what we're doing here. We're just building a basic controller. This is the 2 power supply version. And here's a good idea too. So if you guys bought ready to runs from David and you want to add a second power supply, here's a great option. Just cut you some brackets like this and stack it and hook the 2 of the wires up to this other power supply. And then you have a 2 power supply unit without having to do a lot of work from a single. This is another 1500 build. This is a F48. Now this one's a little bit complicated. I probably shouldn't have done one quite this complicated, but this one really shows you what you can get into a 1500 pretty easily and pretty cleanly. I am running 12 volt here. I'm running a buck converter. Now they make these that are really cheap and they make them really expensive. This one's kind of like a midline one. This one's probably like $6 or something on Amazon. This one actually you can dial it up and down and get it set to 5 volts versus just one that goes from 12 to 5. Because you guys got to remember this F48 here is 5 volt. But yeah, all my pixels are 12 volt. So in order to make this work, because I wanted to put a receiver in, like I said, they do fit. It fits really well. I had to add that buck converter in there. So again, if you're building this particular controller, make sure, and you want 12 volt, don't run that 12 volt line into that F48, or you're going to allow some magic to escape. This is basically the F48 material list. Again, I'm not going to go over everything on it. It's basically the same as the other list. It's just telling you basically what parts you're going to need to be able to assemble that particular controller that I just showed. And then I got another picture of this controller out, basically with the buck converter a little bit closer. Here's the receipt. So this one's built a little bit different than the one you saw in the pictures. Again, I've kind of revised these, and you can see this one's actually on a black ABS plate, where we've gone to start to cut them now. Now let's get into the 32022, the one I told you was my favorite controller. This one has the clear lid on it. The one I showed you earlier was the non-clear lid. But as you can see, this really is a super clean controller. If you're after just something, an F16 with 2 power supplies, this is a really great option for you. Again, it just uses a regular backing plate that you can cut out of anything. This one does have the vent, which is the 1115 vent, which I'll have in my materials list next. It has the glands through it, the PG7s to run all the pigtails. It has the 9 run through the bottom for the power, and it stacks. So basically, we're doing stack brackets here. And you can make these yourself. I started out making them myself. You can get them cut. There's all kinds of options to get these brackets. I mean, we have them. I think Jadiation has a version of them. So they're available to do that. And like I said, if you're after just a really nice, clean looking box, this is definitely a really good option for that. Here's the list of stuff, which again, it's pretty much the same thing as the other lists. I just thought that if someone went back and wanted to see what we needed to do this box, that I would just kind of give this list and they could, screenshot it or whatever. But it gives you, the backing plate sizes and all of that. Here's an up close version of it. And as you can see, here's my original plate. Before the fancy plates that I had cut, this was my version. I would cut this. I actually use a table saw to cut mine, but again, you can use a jigsaw, you can skill saw, whatever you have, and you can cut these things out, and you can see where I've drawn pictures on it, so I knew where to originally mark the holes to bolt this thing down, and a little relief that I had in there originally for the Ethernet connectors to come through. And then on the right, it kind of shows, how you stack them. Again, it's really nothing that fancy. It's just a flat plate. I like to maintain at least a ½ inch between power supplies when you're doing this. You got to make sure you do not cover over where that vent is, where that fan runs. Try to maintain at least a ½ inch there so you can get enough airflow in between. You don't overheat these power supplies. Now, I can tell you that I've had no problems with these running all over the world in all different heats, running that same single vent out the side, 2 power supplies. I've had 0 issues with these. So this is a good clean build idea. Here we go. Now we're showing, this is how you do the Boscoyo strip hole march. So I'll tape the bottom of my box like this, because if I mess up, I want to be able to rip the tape back off, or if I don't like the layout, it's a lot easier for me to tape it and then mark it and then untape it if I have to. As you can see, I kind of squiggled out because I want to move the powers over. And I do this all the way around the box. So if I'm drilling holes in it until I have a main pattern figured out, I'll tape it, and then I'll use my strip to kind of figure out. This is actually in a 32026 box with 32 outputs. There's a lot going on in this picture, but I just really want to show you a good idea to mark your boxes. Again, tape, use some Boscoyo strip. I mean, if you don't have that, I mean, you can use a ruler. I mean, there's all kinds of other options, but that works good, and most people have that. Now let's go into the CG2000s. This is the one I was talking about that basically it fits a receiver really well, and it fits a power supply well, and there's still room really for like an F8 in there if you want. This is pretty much as basic as it gets. Now, again, I have these plates I have cut now, but back when I first started, and you can see this was Lexan, and I use a hole saw to nip the corners, and I cut it out by hand. Just clear Lexan because it's cheap and easy to get, and you can use, like I said, whatever material you have. Now, as you see, I don't use any connectors. On these, it's so tight in here. Unless you glue something in and get rid of all this, it's just really hard to come through one of these boxes with the connectors. So I'll basically just run 2 of my pigtails on one and 2 on the other, and then I put a little zip tie between them so you can't pull on them. And I do the same thing with my power and that 2-foot extension I was telling you about. So that's what this would be. So now when you get it, you can just plug into this. You don't have to get into this box. There's a zip tie here so you can't pull that out. And that works really well for that. Let's see here. Here's the material list for that. So basically, it's the same thing with the screws, the backing plates, the power cords, and spacers. This is the size of the plate, 7 by 12. And actually, I'll flip to the next picture because it kind of shows you the backing plate, as you kind of see the original one and how we kind of modified it. And then we kind of have the one on the right, which is the new cut style that, you know, it looks nicer, but you don't need that. I mean, you can just cut them this way. It's fine. Let's go into some tips. This one's a big one. This one's huge, and I've seen this several times. These nuts, as you can see, do not use these. Or if you absolutely feel that you need to use these, make sure they're on the bottom side of everything. I'm not an advocate of putting the nuts on the top side of the boards. I don't like the idea of the nuts on the top. I don't like the idea of them spinning up on the top. Just for myself, I don't particularly like the nuts on the top. I like a small, tight head screw. As you can see in the picture, these are Allen head screws. You can get these on Amazon. You can get them from any bolt factory online. I mean, they're available anywhere. But they're really small head. They fit, as you can see on that receiver, really tightly in there. And you don't have to worry about those catching anything, ripping your board, or any of that. So I really like this. Now, the problem with this that a lot of people have is they run their bolts up through the bottom of their backing plate, and then they put their spacers on because it's easier to do that, and then you slide the board over. And then you put the nuts on. So I understand why people are doing it the other way. But in the next picture here, this is a solution that I do with my spacers. Basically, I squeeze my spacer with a pair of needle noses. Because they're just really thin plastic anyways. They'll hold that shape. And then you can just slide them over top of the bolts, just like I have here. So now you have your bolts in place, you have your spacers in place, and now you can just lay that on top of your backing plate, flip it over, and put your nuts on. It works well. When we first started doing this, I tried more different ways. We tried hot gluing these suckers on. We tried everything to keep these things on, trying to slide them in place one at a time. It didn't work well. It wasn't, this solution seemed to work the best. Squeeze your spacer, get it a little bit flat, and then just push it over top of your bolt. And then I also included this little picture here for the smart receiver. Since we were showing this on a smart receiver, we actually made this into a sticker that we stick on stuff, because if you look on the bottom of these smart receivers, it actually tells you where the dips need to be. But if you flip it over and bolt it to your plate, you can't see that anymore. So I just kind of wanted to put that here, so if anybody needed to come back to it and be like, what were them switches need to be? I wanted to make that available. Now let's go to the next one. The next one talks about wire. Now this is kind of a controversy back and forth. Is a lot of people put spades. I myself put spades when I first started. Now, the one thing I did do when I first started using spades is I would actually solder every one. I got the solder on spades, so you'd slide it in, give a little cramp, put some solder on it to make a solid connection. That does work well if you solder them in place. I don't like the crimp-ons. And not necessarily that the crimp-ons are bad. It's just sometimes, or if you're not sure, if you don't know how to crimp them properly, or you don't have the proper crimping pliers, you can make a bad crimp on your little fork connector. So now if you have a bad crimp on your wire, and you put that in your power supply, you still have a bad connection, even though you tried to use a fork. So personally, I like to fork my wires. This is 10 gauge wire. I'll take and split it. I use my little screwdriver I have. I have a little tiny straight screwdriver, and I'll just set it down, and I'll just go right between it, wiggle it open, and make this fork, slide it in. And as you can see in the picture, the power supplies, they have teeth on them, little square nuts, and they bite right in to this wire. You can't get a better connection than that. I mean, there's no way to get any better connection than that. So for myself, I don't spade them. I just don't do that anymore, because if you're going to spade them, you're going to need to solder them just to make sure that you have a good connection. Unless you're just really good at putting spades on, you have a really good set of pliers, and you have really good spades. It's just another spot of failure. By doing this, you've eliminated one connection, one less spot to make heat. So I personally like to do this. I don't think there was too much else. I did want to give a quick list of some vendors. I know most of these vendors are on the other sites, but here's pretty much what we use for vendors. And again, there's a lot of other vendors out there, so please don't feel that this is just grabbing these. But most everything you saw in my presentation come from these vendors. Now, the only one that didn't, they probably you see, is like Jadiation. And I want to speak about them just for a minute, because they're another solution to your boxes. They make really nice plates. They make nice kits. And another solution to all this, if you don't feel comfortable cutting your plastic, you don't feel comfortable doing that, Jadiation has some really, really great stuff. And for most all these boxes I showed you, you can basically go on and get their kit. They have multiple layouts. You can even print their layout and cut it on your own plastic. I mean, that's how awesome they are. They just they give that away to everybody. So that's another great company to use for doing that. And like I said, and plus all these others, I mean, you can get pretty much anything you need from any of these guys. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much, Ricky. Appreciate it. Learned quite a lot.
The xLights project exists because of people like you. Help continue the project by making a donation today at xlights.org/donate.